All right, welcome back everybody to RCT Creations and the Fun Corporation series. And we're joining in here for the 1976 season. Now for the Fun Corporation, not going to be horribly eventful, a couple of small additions, one to each park for us. However, in terms of the coaster world, this was a very, very eventful year, so let's go ahead and just hop straight into it, and we'll head straight over to Funland to get started. Alright, and here we are at Funland. So the addition that each of these parks is going to get is going to be a small mini golf course. Now, these were originally intended to be upcharge attractions. However, with the way I have been playing this series and how long it takes, I just can't viably do upcharges because guests get sick of it in about, an in-game year, if that, and they won't pay like $1 to do mini golf. So you know what? We're just going to say it's figuratively an upcharge, so we don't actually charge anything for it. But I'm going to leave a sign up at the front that says, mini golf for $1. So we give each park one of these. For Funland, I picked a nice area that we just expanded into with Corkscrew, so it's going to sit right up at the front of the park and right next to our coaster. And we're going to leave that open no matter what. So while Corkscrew goes through its annual maintenance, we'll have mini golf there for guests to enjoy, because I kind of like that little small plaza area of the park. And I think the mini golf ended up looking nice at both of these parks. I really do enjoy it. As far as Joyland goes, we picked another area on the other side of that expansion, into that expansion that we started with Apollo. So to kind of get a little bit more on that far side, I just kind of went across yet again and just built a little mini golf there. In hindsight, I wish I had kept the level with Apollo even, but I didn't, so is what it is. But each mini golf course is going to be the exact same layout. Well, not the exact same layout, pretty close to the exact same layout, but have the same, order of the holes that you play, and then have the same holes that each player plays, and each is going to be a quote-unquote $1. And if you pay attention while I'm constructing this, you'll see me try to do the upcharge, which I very quickly found out does not work for the way I'm doing this series. So the mini golf is free, even though it says it charges $1. But I kind of like the way both these mini golf courses ended up turning out. I mean, they both kind of add a little bit more to the areas they're in, and especially for this park in Joyland, it adds just quite a bit more for us to get into on that far side, because I do have some expansion plans in these next couple of years to add on to. So I'm excited for that as we get farther on into the future. Alright, as far as our ridership numbers go, I'll have both of them on the screen yet again. Nothing too out of the ordinary between the two parks. One thing I found very interesting was the fact that Corkscrew brought in over 200,000 riders, and for a roller coaster we have, for a thrill ride, or anything that's not a transport ride really, that is by far the highest of anything we've brought in. Cyclone is behind at 180,000. I should be more specific. I mean, Corkscrew bring in 203,000. It's a short ride, but it runs shorter trains than Cyclone does, and it only runs 2 compared to Cyclone's 3. So I find the fact that it pulled in 200,000 riders in one season pretty darn impressive from a small coaster like that. And it means we're getting our guests on the ride faster, and that's pretty much all any of us want, especially when we go to parks ourselves. As far as flats go at Funland, pretty standard stuff. 200,000 for the transport rides, which is expected. Midway main lift is going to look pretty high because we combined both of them into one, as I've mentioned before, so nothing too out of the ordinary on this end of Funland. As far as Joyland goes, White Cyclone bring in over 100,000 riders, and then the Joyland Mainline Railroad bring over 100,000 riders as well. Those are the only two in that park that bring in a terribly large amount of riders. Salem Lake being around 80,000. Pretty standard for par for the course for that ride. As far as low ridership, Wildcat is very concerning, because it's bringing in less than 25,000 riders a season, and that's something we're going to need to address pretty early on, I feel, especially at Joyland. Whereas Funland's Wildcat's bringing in double that at 40,000. Joyland's bringing in 22,000. Really isn't cutting it, and we're only 3 full seasons into having that ride at that park, and already I'm starting to see that there. But until I really need a space to expand, I might as well just leave the ride there. But you can almost count on that being a pretty early one to go, because we're already seeing plenty of issues with its throughput right off the bat there. Alright, as far as Fun Corporation finances go, this was a very successful year for us. Every single month outside of September and November for Funland was profitable, and that's amazing. So the more we're expanding this park, the better off it's doing for itself. And the reason September and November are negative the way they are is because that's the end of the peak season, and that can be expected with the amount of attendance you have going down as you get closer into the off season. But yeah, I mean, really, really happy with the way Funland's starting to do with the additions we're giving it. So definitely keeping that park year round for sure. As far as Joyland goes, again, Joyland, a huge profit center. I mean, each park bringing in well over $2 million, and then our total profit being over $4 million, and then being able to bank $3 million of that is pretty darn impressive. So I'm definitely going to start sticking with the starting each park with 500,000, as opposed to starting Funland with $1 million and then Joyland with 500. Might as well just keep it the same for both and just start the entire company with $1 million total and work with what we've got. But as far as finances go for 1976, we're looking pretty darn good, and I'm very happy with the results we have there. And now let's talk about what happened around the industry in the 1976 season. Now, this was a very, very big year for the amusement industry as a whole, just especially in terms of innovation, but especially even in terms of parks that opened that season. So we're going to go ahead and talk about 2 coasters and 2 parks that opened this year, and these 2 parks have always fascinated me. This is going to be the 2 Marriott Great America parks. So one opening in Gurnee, Illinois, and the other opening in Santa Clara, California. Now, both parks starting under the Marriott ownership, and each one was purchased by a different company when Marriott decided to sell. So Paramount ended up purchasing the park in California, now known as California's Great America, or at the time, Paramount's Great America. And then ended up purchasing Six Flags Great America. Now, recently, with the Cedar Fair Six Flags merger, these 2 parks are once again under the same ownership, so it ends up coming full circle for both of these parks, which I think is kind of cool. But just the way these 2 parks have developed differently has always fascinated me between the 2 different corporations that own them. Now, I have had the opportunity to go to Six Flags Great America, but I have not yet had the chance to go over to California's Great America. But Six Flags Great America currently sits as my favorite Six Flags park, over Great Adventure, over St. Louis, over America. I can't think of any other Six Flags parks off the top of my head right now that I've been to, but Six Flags Great America, definitely my favorite of the legacy Six Flags parks as of right now. We'll see if that changes when I get the opportunity to go to more. But as far as the 2 coasters go, now these parks had 2 major coasters that opened with them. The first one is going to be Whizzer, which was a Schwarzkopf extended jumbo jet model. Only one of 2 left in operation. Now, each park originally had one. However, the one in California did not last nearly as long due to space limitations, so it had to be removed fairly early on, in my opinion, in its career. But the one at Six Flags Great America, despite a scare in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, still chugging and running 2 trains, and it's getting kind of apparent that that coaster is running short on the amount of parts they have, but they just gave it a controls upgrade this year, I believe, so very good for them. I enjoy Whizzer. It's not a ride I usually go out of my way to ride every time I go over to Six Flags Great America, but enjoy it nonetheless. Now, the second coaster, or major coaster that opened with the Great Americas, would be Turn of the Century. I'm not going to get into its update yet. I'm hoping to do that once we get into 1980. However, Turn of the Century would open in 1976, 2 Aero Loopers. Again, I've been on the one at Six Flags Great America. Do enjoy this ride. It took me 4 visits, I think, to finally get a ride on this thing. But I finally got it, and I'll never forget how excited I was to see it testing from my hotel room across the way. But very interesting thing about Turn of the Century is it has a very similar layout to another coaster we're going to talk about soon. But Aero Looper, Lift Hill, 2 airtime hills before hitting a mid-course, and then turning into 2 corkscrews, and then eventually hitting a helix, heading towards the brakes. So the 2 major coasters for the Great America parks, 2 very successful coasters, and in fact both Turn of the Centuries are still operating at each of their respective Great America parks, which I think is very cool, although they have been modified, and we'll get into that once we hit the 1980 season. Now, the next coaster we're going to talk about is Motorcycle Chase at a competitor to Funland, Knott's Berry Farm. Now, this would be the first full-scale aero steeplechase coaster, and it was one of only 2 aero steeplechase coasters constructed. That is, if you don't count the separate tracks. The one at Knott's had 4 separate tracks and originally opened with motorcycle-themed cars. However, these were later changed to soapbox-themed cars as it got older. But I think a very cool concept. There's still one of these running at Blackpool Pleasure Beach over in the UK. And that one runs 3 tracks and is actually featured, or 2 of the tracks are actually featured in the Blackpool Pleasure Beach scenario in Roller Coaster Tycoon. So, if if you look at that scenario, those 2 coasters, there are actually 3 of them, and they are all still running, as a matter of fact, which I find very cool, and hopefully I will get the chance to ride those in the future. But for now, have not had the opportunity, and since Motorcycle Chase is long gone, won't get the opportunity to ride that one, but I'm hoping to eventually get on the one over in the UK. So now we're starting to get a little bit into the innovation that was the 1976 season. So we're going to start with the Great American Revolution, located at Magic Mountain. This was the first successful modern vertical loop on a roller coaster, and really cool looking ride. Haven't had the chance to go to Magic Mountain yet, but I'm hoping to. Another park I'm hoping to get to eventually. But, you know, Schwarzkopf looper, 113 feet tall, top speed of 55 miles an hour. Pretty long track length as well. And the fun thing about it is the loop is located right in the middle of the ride, and the loop is visible right near the main entrance of Magic Mountain. So I think a very cool centerpiece. And again, a huge piece of coaster history, being the first successful modern vertical loop on a roller coaster. I can't call it the first successful modern looping roller coaster because, in my opinion, Corkscrew at Knott's Berry holds that standard, but Great American Revolution, first successful roller coaster with a vertical loop, and it was located in the middle of the layout. Next coaster to talk about will be Cedar Point's Corkscrew, which opened, I believe, 4 days after Magic Mountain's Great American Revolution. So this would be the first coaster to feature 3 inversions, featuring the standard Arrow double corkscrew towards the end of the ride. However, this ride would feature Arrow's take on the vertical loop. Now, where Great American Revolution and Schwarzkopf kind of went for a circular vertical loop, this would feature a clothoid vertical loop where it gets tighter at the top and is a little bit more spread out at the bottom. So the forces are more spread out, are more consistent, is where I'm trying to go with this, across the entire loop. So the forces are more consistent because the loop starts out shallower and then the radius gets tighter the closer to the top you get. So the first successful Arrow vertical loop, and then Arrow would take that design and run with that. So really cool that these 2 coasters were that close to each other. It really makes me wonder what history would say if they opened the same day. But, you know, 2 coasters very, very close to each other and very innovative for their designs. Now, I have had the opportunity to ride Cedar Point's Corkscrew. You know, it's certainly a ride these days. Do I think it should be removed? No, I think it has its place, but it definitely could use a little bit of work. Some modern Vekoma vest trains, I think, would do it a lot of good just to make its rideability better. And me being a pretty tall guy, these Arrow trains are clearly not designed for people over 6 feet tall, so it's a pretty uncomfortable ride for me, on top of the fact that it really is not that smooth. But holds its place, and the double corkscrew over the main midway, very, very cool. And that's always such a cool view when you walk down the midway and can see the ride just looping right over the main midway. Really, really cool feature at Cedar Point. The last coaster we're going to talk about on this episode is the Screamin' Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. At the time of its opening, this ride stood at 110 feet, which wasn't quite the world record, and had a track length of 3,872 feet, or 3,872 feet, excuse me. I said that completely wrong. Either way. But pretty long ride. I have ridden this one, and at the time of its opening in 1976, this would be the world's fastest roller coaster. Have had the opportunity to ride it, although it has been about 8 years since the last time I've ridden it. Don't remember it being the smoothest, but I do remember it gave really, really good airtime, and this is a park I'm hoping to get back to next year. And hopefully I get back to Six Flags St. Louis and get another chance to ride this ride, and hopefully this time I'll get the opportunity to conquer Mr. Freeze. But that is for another episode. Alright, to end this episode, Jack Green 7342 leaves a comment. In the 1976 season, you could do a Schwarzkopf looping coaster like Revolution at Six Flags Magic Mountain. And while I'm definitely not opposed to this, Revolution being so revolutionary for the time, get it, it's in the name, we're going to go ahead and let Magic Mountain have that record, because that one's just so important, and I really don't want to change history as we go through this. This is why Corkscrew being kind of an influence from Knott's. So as far as adding coasters goes, especially in this era, as of right now, Funland has 5 coasters, and Joyland has 4. So to me, that's a pretty darn good number for the era. Now, I think as this series goes on, I'm definitely going to look more into adding bigger and better coasters and becoming more of a coaster park as we go on, but I think as of right now, we should focus more on some flat rides and giving guests a little bit more entertainment, especially as far as the era goes. All right, this has been the 1976 season, and though for the Fun Corporation not too adventurous and not too exciting, we do have a lot of positive updates in terms of our revenue as a park. And then, again, 1976 being such a big year in the amusement industry. I know I said I would limit coasters down to 3 an episode, but there's just so many to talk about. And it's definitely going to get harder and harder the further into the series we go, because we're going to get some very, very cool modern conceptions, especially as we get closer to the roller coaster wars. Anyway, my name is RCT Creations. See you next time.